At this point, you want to brainstorm the most efficient way to organize the new textile library. This will look different for different agencies depending on the standards that surround annotation. I'm going to go over a couple different examples here. So let's look at example 1. In this case, all of the drafting labels are the same size, and the only changes to the text are going to be if the text is proposed versus existing. Proposed text is going to be bolded and straight, and existing text is going to not be bolded and also be italicized. You want to keep your text style list as short as possible, so think about the base standards for the text and remember that the user can always customize the text further to meet their needs during placement. So if I think about what the requirements are for these text styles, I need to indicate if they're proposed or existing. I need to indicate if they are straight versus slanted, and I also need to indicate if the text is bolded or not. Now there are other settings that you might want to include, so you could further duplicate or replicate this list by giving options for masked text, where you have a background behind the text. Maybe you have different custom line spacing that you need to apply. So as you add different settings to make the text styles different, this is going to expand the list. Right, so I'm going to go in and just follow up on example 1. So for the first one we have existing text, and I'll go ahead and rename that to existing slanted. And then for the second one, I'll rename that one to P for proposed, straight, and bolded. Now what you would want to do from here is you are going to need to go ahead and change some of these settings, one being the font, the other important piece being the height and width, which I'll go over later. Now I'll delete these two, and now I'm going to talk about the second example. So in this example, you might have a situation where the drafting labels are going to be different sizes for the different types of notes that are placed, and this is a common scenario. So in addition to the differences that I listed before for design and proposed text, you may also have different size groups to consider. This example shows 4 sizes, which I've classified with small, medium large, and large. You could also type the text size as a number instead, so maybe 0.008 for small or 0.18 for large, just as an example. I'm going to go in and rename the text styles to include an indicator if it's proposed or existing, an indicator if the text is straight versus slanted, an indicator if the text is bolded, and in this example I'm also going to include that size. Now again, you may want to expand this list further by giving a masked option, custom line spacing option, if it's underlined, or any of those other settings that could make the text style different. So I have gone through each one of those text styles and I've renamed each of them to indicate if it's proposed versus existing, straight versus slanted, bolded, and I've also included the size. But before I go in and alter any of these settings, I want to talk about some of the other things to consider with your text styles and how you're going to want to build this library out further. So beyond the text styles that are going to be used for the drafters, you're also going to need some text styles for configuring the annotation. So this is going to be your text favorites that are going to be used for labels or for annotation groups for plan, profile, and cross-section. When I build this list out, I can think about adding in the justification, as that's sometimes needed. But inside of the text favorite manager, I'm able to specify or override a majority of the text style settings directly in that manager. So it's not really necessary. But just to show you what this would look like, I'm going to go ahead and add those additional text styles. So I've added those additional text styles in here, and what I've done is I'm just using one size as an example. This list would be expanded out further, everything that starts with the tilde, in the event that you have different text sizes that need to be used for different pieces of the annotation. But just to make it simple, I've just chosen all the same size. But what's different is going to be the justification that I've added each for. And then I could expand this list further for all the different sizes that I would need, and I could just include that piece inside of the text styles. So I have a list of proposed annotations. I also have a list of existing annotations, and I've started them all with tildes. So you could do this however you need, but the idea here is that this is going to put them at the bottom of the list, and through training we will allow the drafters to know that these are the labels that they would use for drafting notes, and then everything that starts with a tilde, or maybe you want to put configuration in the name, are going to indicate that these are not labels that they, or text styles that they would use for their labels. Instead, these are purely used for configuration purposes.